Today I'll be showing you how you can turn foam core or cardboard into your own DIY miniature trays for storage and transport. Hey everyone, Gabriel with Gabriel's Hobby Studio here. So I had gotten this box at a thrift store a while back, probably about a year ago. It came with this other one, and it's just like the typical ones that you would find at any craft store where it's thin wood and the hardware is not really the greatest. You can take any box like this, or any cardboard box, decorate it up a little bit, add these trays, and you've now got miniature storage for storing your minis away or transporting them to your games. Let me show you what I mean. In here is where I keep most of my skirmish models. I've got a clear template that I use for blast and grenade weapons in Necromunda or 40k style games. I keep the playmat from the First Strike box in here as well, just for quick games every once in a while. When I was doing the layout for this, I made a little tray out of the side where I can hold my tools, my tape measure, laser pointer, pencil eraser, dice, etc. Each of these layers is designed to be removable. When I designed this first one, I laid out it in a way that my most commonly used minis and tools would be on the top, where I'm going to use them the most. And if I needed to get to anything below, I could easily just remove the tray, or just remove the tool tray to get to some of the larger models on the side. Now, this bottom tray layer is removable as well, but I'm never going to need to get underneath. I decided not to glue it in, so that way I could remove it if I ever wanted to rebuild the trays in a different manner, so I could fit either larger models in there or different sized tools. Now, what I did to this box was I added a latch so that way I could close down the lid and make sure it was secured. These corners are also not just decorative, they help to protect the corners. On the sides, I've attached these 2D rings. You typically will use these for attaching wire to the back of flat canvases. So this is what I'm going to use to put straps on to the boxes. Enough of that. Let's go over the tools and materials that we're going to be using for this project. The hardware that I'm going over here is specifically for wooden boxes. Like I said previously, we have these 2D rings which are going to be used to attach straps to this box. You will find these in picture hanging aisles, and particularly look at canvas hanging sections of craft stores if you're looking there. I've got these decorative corner pieces here. They're actually different than the other ones, but I'll explain that later. And then I've got the clasp, which will attach to the top and then allow the lid to shut securely. Most of these do come with their own screws or other methods of attaching them, and that is extremely convenient. You're going to want some screwdrivers. The smaller screws are going to require some smaller screwdrivers. I've got a precision set here that I'll be using, although you can use a hand screwdriver or a screwdriver in a drill for this. You're also going to want hot glue, preferably the low temp hot glue, so that way you don't melt the foam. You're going to need your board material. This can be foam core, cardboard, the plastic corrugated sheeting. You would typically find that stuff is what yard signs are made out of. So let's go ahead and prepare the box now. If you're going to use something that has hardware already in it, make sure that you remove whatever hardware you're not going to keep at this stage. It just makes it easier later on. I forgot to turn on the hot glue. So while my hot glue is heating up here, I'm gonna go ahead and start taking the measurements. What I'm seeing for my box in particular is that it's 7 inches in every direction. I am making sure to check each direction because even though it looks square, it could be off by 1/4 of an inch or just a couple of millimeters here or there, which would throw off our measurements for cutting out the foam. For the depth and for the lid, I am going to have to use a tape measure instead of a ruler, so that way I can get an accurate measurement. Once I've got the measurements for both of those depths, I'll just add them together and that will tell me how tall the inside of the box is. Eventually, I will need to take into account that 2 thicknesses of foam board are going to be inside, taking up some of that room. So when it comes to that point, I'm just going to subtract 2 thicknesses of the foam. In this case, it's 5 millimeters, so 10 millimeters in total. I'm going to cut out the main square, which is going to make the bottom tray, and I'm not going to cut out the other one just yet. I want to make sure that I've got a good fit, and then I can use this one to template the other one. After I have that bottommost piece out, I'm going to cut out some wall sections the same length as that square is in one dimension. When cutting foam core, you'll want to keep in mind that you want the knife to be doing all the work, and that is by the angle at which you are pulling the blade through the foam. We are going to want the angle at which the blade sits in relation to the foam at a very low angle, so that way a lot of the surface of the blade is in contact as it's being drugged through instead of tearing through. If you've ever cut foam core and you've gotten pilling or those little tearing and little balls on the end, that means that either your blade is not sharp enough or that the angle is too high and not enough blade is making contact, so it's just pulling at the foam instead of cutting through it. When making these trays, you'll want to make sure that you've got some of the minis that you plan on using nearby, so that way you can take measurements off of them. You're going to want 2 critical measurements. 1, how wide is the average large model that you'll be putting in these trays? 2, you're also going to want to check how tall the miniatures are. The wall is going to have to be a little taller than that measurement. After checking the height of the minis and going over the math, I can go ahead and make each of the walls a little over 2 inches tall. Now that'll fit all of the minis that I want in there, and I'll have plenty of headspace before the tier above it or the lid when I shut the box. To make sure that the width is correct, just make sure that you measure the widest part. With that measurement, I can then measure from one edge out, then I can make a line where the wall needs to go. Finally, we can go ahead and put on the first wall section. I'm going to start with this banged up corner one, that's just so I can get it out of the way, and we're going to apply a bead of hot glue all the way down one of the ends of the foam core. When you go to put the wall down, make sure that you're gluing it on the outside of the line that you just made, so that way you still have that measurement that you so carefully measured, and you're not accidentally taking off 5 millimeters of it. Now, if you're like me, you overglue everything. You can just take a scrap piece of foam and run that along the one edge. That'll help to straighten the wall out, and it'll also help wipe off the extra glue while leaving it only in the very recessed corner between the wall and the floor. With the wall on there now, I now have a tab that I can grab onto so I can get that bottom piece out. And let's check the fit. It does seem to only fit one way, so I'm just going to go ahead and mark the top and the bottom. And the top for me is going to be where the hinges are at. With that tray in there and only one wall up, right now is a really good time to actually test fit the models and make sure that they will actually work in there. I can speak from experience that you'll save yourself a lot of time and headache by just testing them now instead of doing the entire tray and then testing it. Now, the walls are simple. We're just going to repeat the same thing that we did for that first wall all the way down. Because I want the new one to also have a space for me to put all my tools at, I'm going to make sure that one of these trays is measured to fit the width of my Necromunda dice box. And then I will measure the trays for all of my miniatures after that. This smaller box is the one that I plan on putting my Necromunda models in for traveling to games. I'm going to carry whatever gang it is that I'm currently playing, and another 1 or 2 backups just in case. My main gripe with how I made my previous box was by having the tool section free floating. So I'm just building that into the top tier. My tools previously were falling down into the lower trays, and I'd have to remove everything just to get to my pencils and erasers. The tool section is going to have a shorter wall than all the remainder of the walls, so after I get a regular sized wall put in place, I'm going to then close the box and check for a fit. At this point, I can see that the wall is just slightly too tall, and I'm going to have to trim off 1 millimeter at a time until it gets to a good fit. We're also going to knock the corners off, so that way there's no way that those can catch on either portion of the lid when it's opening and closing. To help prevent my tools from falling out, I'm going to just cut a couple of small foam core pieces to cap that in, so this row is going to be a self-contained tray. After you've gotten to this point, you can go ahead and add any of the embellishments that you want. I'm just going to put on corners of the box and the 2 holes for screws. I'm just going to use my pencil and trace where those are at so I can pre-drill them. I ended up passing over on the manual screwdriver and just took the little bit, put it in my drill and used that. However, that does also drastically increase the risk of splitting the wood or stripping out the hole by over tightening the screws. So that's something to keep in mind. I'm going to move to the latch. I'm going to finger gauge a line from the top of the box so I know how far down the latch needs to sit, and I can do the same thing I did with the corners, tracing the holes for where the hardware needs to sit so I can do my pre-drilling. So this project has actually several mistakes. little oversights or just time passing. I made the other box over a year ago, I think, and I'm just making this one now, which means when I bought all the hardware, it's been sitting for a year, somewhere in storage this entire time. I don't know if somewhere along the line, some of my screws got used for other projects, or Iron Giant called them home. My solution is I'm just going to drill the hole in the latch bigger to fit this larger screw. The last piece of hardware that I'm going to attach are these 2D rings. Again, these are for my straps later on. I'm just using the same finger gauge technique so I can measure the same distance from a certain point on the box, but for front to back, I'm just eyeballing it. I've got my Necromunda Gore Lyeth gangers. I wanted to make sure I could fit the entire gang in here. This box has been sitting here for a year doing nothing, just taking up space, and at least now it can be a functional piece of my hobby. If you enjoyed this content and you would like to see more, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell icon so you can be notified when I post new content. As always, have fun, be creative, and happy hobbying.